Why should we give land to the Indians when it clearly says on the paper it belonged to the farmers?
But surely you must realize that this is their home. These indigenous tribes have been living on this land for hundreds of years.
Listen, this world is not fair. Some people win, some people lose. The whole world think they can tell Brazil what to do with her land. Sorry, no. We do what we please.
Bumi kita. Dia selalu mengalir dan bergerak. Sebuah simfoni kekuatan yang bekerja sama menghembuskan kehidupan pada 4 arah angin dunia. Dan selama bermilenium, kebudayaan seluruh dunia menyebut dia ibunya.
We live on an incredibly beautiful planet. A home that we will hopefully pass on to generations to come. But as the years go by, it's becoming increasingly hard to imagine what kind of a world we're leaving behind us. We've spent the last 4 years traveling around the world, filming the stark reality that people now face from the threat of ecological collapse. It's now become very clear to us that there's one thing driving the destruction of our ecosystems faster than anything else. Let us show you how this very same thing might just also be our salvation.
Climate and environmental scientists warn that we are fast approaching the point of no return if we don't make a substantial course reversal.
We see really serious catastrophic effects in the next few years, certainly in the next decade or two. The world will be completely different from the way it is now.
Sejak tahun 1900, kita telah melihat kenaikan dramatis pada bencana akibat cuaca di dunia. Bencana akibat cuaca 4 kali lebih banyak dalam 50 tahun terakhir dibanding 100 tahun sebelumnya.
We began to work together to move this issue onto the global center stage. There was a lot of discussion about the contribution from buildings and from industrial factories, but I became aware during that same period of time that there was another factor that was going undiscussed, and that is the role of animal agriculture, which I could see was playing some significant role around the planet. But this was the elephant in the room no one wanted to talk about.
Whatever environmental issue you want to look at, from species loss to water pollution to water use to climate change, animal agriculture is one of the top causes.
The critical, widespread negative impact of animal agriculture on our planet is undeniable. Severe global crises, from climate change and environmental damage to species extinction, hunger, poverty, disease, and antibiotic resistance, all of these have direct connections to animal agriculture and the massive inefficiency of our current food production systems.
Sebuah laporan yang diterbitkan oleh Wikileaks tahun 2009 mengungkap percakapan antara eksekutif Nestle dan pihak pejabat Amerika Serikat yang disebut The Tour de Horizon. Eksekutif Nestle mengatakan penelitian mereka menunjukkan bahwa dunia terancam kehabisan air tawar dalam 30 tahun mendatang. Laporan itu menyatakan bahwa salah satu alasan terbesar yang mengarahkan kita kepada bencana ini adalah permintaan dunia untuk produk daging.
If you look at the impact that food choice has on global warming, it's very significant. Eating meat is huge for global climate, and that's something where personal choice is the determining factor. So there's the only case I can think of where individual human choice would have a big effect would be food.
We're now over the line. And the idea that we're going to double meat production between now and 2050, this is just unsustainable. This is going to have to give. Our diet is taking us to an abyss.
A significant reason why livestock production has been having such a huge impact on greenhouse gas emissions is because of the large surfaces of forests that have been destroyed in order to make room for pastures and for the growth of soybean and maize for feedstock production.
Hutan kita dulu dipenuhi dengan beragam jenis kehidupan yang luar biasa. Beberapa tahun terakhir, kita mulai memiliki selera tak terpuaskan untuk daging dan susu. Dan saat permintaan daging meningkat, kita membutuhkan semakin banyak tanah. Jadi kita menebang dan membakar banyak hutan alami, menghancurkan apapun yang ada di jalan kita untuk membuka lahan bagi hewan-hewan yang ingin kita makan. Karena hewan-hewan ini tak dibiarkan berkeliaran layaknya di alam liar, daerah mereka merumput segera habis, maka tentu saja kita harus memberi mereka makan. Jadi sekali lagi kita menebang dan membakar makin banyak hutan, menanami tanah dengan jagung dan kedelai yang dikembangkan secara genetik, dimandikan dengan pestisida, herbisida, dan pupuk kimiawi sintetis. Peternakan hewan telah sungguh mengubah wajah planet kita. Lahan hijau digunakan untuk tanaman yang dikonsumsi manusia. Area luas yang membentang dari ujung ke ujung planet kita. Namun tanah untuk peternakan hewan yang ditunjukkan dengan warna merah kini mengambil alih sebagian besar tanah bumi kita. Areanya jauh lebih besar daripada yang dipakai untuk tanaman manusia.
Almost all the Earth's surface now bears the mark of some kind of human impact, and most of that is livestock production.
Agriculture has transformed the planet like nothing else. To produce milk, we farm an area about the size of Brazil. To produce beef, we farm an area about the size of Canada, the United States, the whole of Central America, Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador combined. To produce eggs, we farm an area the size of Sweden. To produce aquaculture feed, an area about the size of the UK. A plant-based diet would reduce the amount of land required to produce our food by 3.1 billion hectares. That's an area the size of the entire African continent.
Amazon adalah hutan hujan tropis terbesar di dunia. Tanah kuno dan kaya keanekaragaman hayati ini perlahan-lahan tergantikan. Sering diasumsikan bahwa sebagian besar kedelai yang ditanam di Brazil ditujukan untuk konsumsi manusia. Nyatanya, kurang dari 6% kedelai yang tumbuh di seluruh dunia dikonsumsi oleh manusia. Sebagian besar ditanam untuk membuat pakan untuk ternak. Kedelai diekspor ke seluruh dunia untuk memberi makan miliaran ayam, ikan ternak, babi, dan sapi yang kita makan tiap hari. Hutan tak hanya rumah bagi jutaan spesies satwa liar dan tanaman, tapi juga berperan besar sebagai pengatur atmosfer planet kita. Hari demi hari, perlahan-lahan hutan menghirup karbon dioksida dan menghasilkan miliaran ton oksigen bersih untuk udara kita. Setiap tahun diperkirakan 18 juta hektar hutan hilang. Luasnya sekitar seukuran negara Panama. Diperkirakan sekitar setengah dari hutan tropis di bumi kini telah dihancurkan. Dan beberapa ilmuwan memprediksi bahwa tanpa tindakan signifikan yang dilakukan di seluruh dunia, pada tahun 2030 hanya akan ada 10% hutan yang tersisa.
One of the most precious things we have in the world is our rainforests. The rainforests are literally being chewed away by farmers who know they can make money by cutting another acre and then another acre and then another acre for need.
Aí nosso avô naquele tempo, cacique, então já falou, olha, você vai sofrer muito, porque o branco ruralismo.
Setiap tahun, desa-desa dari ratusan suku penghuni asli hutan hujan Amazon terbakar habis. Mereka dipindahkan secara paksa dari tanahnya. Banyak dari mereka dibunuh oleh para militer agribisnis yang ingin mengubah hutan rumah mereka menjadi lahan pertanian untuk menanam kedelai untuk pakan ternak. Salah satu suku yang mendapat dampak terburuk adalah suku Guarani Kaiowá di Mato Grosso do Sul.
Para nós indígenas, antigamente as florestas que é a nossa casa. Quem começou a destruir a nossa aldeia através da agropecuária. Então derrubaram as nossas matas, destruindo os animais, os rios.
Eu estou falando, agora vai plantar soja, aí depois vai passar veneno, né? Tudo coisa. Vai passar adubo também, vai cair tudo no rio. E nós revoltando no soterrar para sustentar a nossa família. Né?
So there was actually a report that came out in 2018, and they found that the world's top 5 livestock corporations now release more annual greenhouse gas emissions than ExxonMobil, Shell, and BP. It is crazy when you think about it, because the EU is spending £24 billion of taxpayers' money on livestock farming each year. And this is at a time when we are facing an ecological collapse and we drastically need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's no surprise that people are asking a lot of questions now about the fact that there seems to be some serious conflicts of interest going on here.
There's some very heavy lobbying going on of government, and I think that happens throughout the world. And it's just a historic thing that needs to be, I think, rebalanced.
As I've mentioned to you over the phone, I've worked with a number of large livestock companies around the world. So the way it works is that a representative from pays us usually up to €500,000. We then target the relevant politicians from different governments around the world, and motions are made to pass legislation in favour of the company's business strategies. For environmental policy, we can be very persuasive in order to abolish or heavily relax environmental regulations in government, so our clients have more freedom in their work. The other day we managed to kill proposed legislation that would have had a huge impact on the industry based on a report from the UNFAO. The industry is just concerned with growth, but the environmental data that's coming out now, it's really making that difficult for them.
Today, democracy does not always function as well as it should because of the huge influence that agribusiness corporations and livestock producers in particular exercise on decision-making.
A former director of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, Dr. Samuel Jutzi, warned as far back as 2010 that interventions by agribusiness lobbyists were blocking reforms that would offer better standards for human health and preserving the environment. Big animal agribusiness corporations and food producers' influence over political decisions about the regulation of their industry has long been a concern for campaigners who see the narrow interests of the industry taking widespread control.
If we have any doubt about how powerful this influence is, we can recall that, for example, when the Advisory Committee on Dietary Guidelines in the US made recommendations to the US government as to how dietary guidelines should be shaped, they were blocked by this very powerful lobby of agribusiness interests.
Tahun 2013, Organisasi Pangan dan Pertanian PBB merilis laporan penting berjudul Mengatasi Perubahan Iklim Melalui Peternakan. Laporan itu menyatakan bahwa peternakan lebih banyak bertanggung jawab atas kontribusi emisi gas rumah kaca daripada gabungan semua transportasi di dunia. Semakin banyak ilmuwan meyakini bahwa dampak peternakan faktanya bahkan lebih buruk dari yang dinyatakan dalam laporan FAO.
There are close ties between the research organisations and government policy and industry. It's very pervasive because livestock industries depend on government policies that support them.
The FAO report was prepared within the FAO by specialists of agriculture and livestock production, not by specialists of the environmental issues associated with agricultural production. I believe that a more serious concern, of course, is that the International Meat Association was involved in preparing the report, which does raise the question of the independence with which the study was prepared.
Government policy in that regard is not for the benefit of the land, it's for the benefit of the industry.
Dalam laporan mereka, FAO bermitra dengan negara anggota, organisasi non-pemerintah, dan banyak organisasi lainnya, termasuk Federasi Produsen Pakan Eropa, Federasi Susu Internasional, Sekretariat Daging Internasional, Komisi Telur Internasional, dan Dewan Unggas Internasional. Dalam industri yang bernilai lebih dari $1 triliun ini, bukankah ini lembaga-lembaga yang akan menderita kerugian terbesar dari laporan sains yang menentang peternakan? Hanya ada segelintir orang yang tahu lebih banyak tentang laut dibanding Dr. Sylvia Earle. Dr. Earle adalah wanita pertama yang menjadi kepala ilmuwan dari Administrasi Kelautan dan Atmosfer Nasional Amerika Serikat dan pemegang rekor dunia untuk waktu terlama berjalan di dasar laut dalam tak terikat dibanding manusia lainnya.
When I was a child, the idea of a dead zone in the ocean was not even in our vocabulary. But in the 20th century, as agriculture began to greatly expand, the areas around the coast began to show signs of wear and tear. The first, most notorious spotlight area, I think, was off the Gulf of Mexico. And it has simply grown over the years, an annual phenomenon that is coincident with the application of massive amounts of fertilizer.
Jutaan mil persegi dialokasikan untuk menanam pakan untuk hewan yang kita makan, dan banyak disemprot dengan pupuk nitrogen. Nitrogen mengalir dari ladang ke sungai dan akhirnya mencapai lautan kita. Air kaya nitrogen merangsang pertumbuhan ganggang berlebihan, yang mengakibatkan meledaknya populasi ganggang hingga dapat terlihat dari ruang angkasa. Ganggang membuat air kehabisan oksigen dan mengakibatkan kematian bagi kehidupan laut di sekitarnya. Sejak permintaan daging meningkat, zona mati yang rendah oksigennya ini terus tumbuh dan berkembang.
Hundreds of dead zones that have developed all around the coastlines of the world. And Okay, people say, that's too bad for the fish. So sorry, fish. But we need to understand that what we do to the ocean, we're doing to ourselves. I want others to see and to see for themselves. This is all we've got, this little blue miracle.
Sebagian orang meyakini bahwa mengubah pola makan kita dari daging dan beralih ke ikan akan membawa efek menguntungkan bagi planet kita. Nyatanya hal ini sangat jauh dari kebenaran. Jika laut mati, maka kita manusia mungkin akan mati bersamanya. Karena setiap helaan nafas kita berasal dari udara yang diciptakan lautan kita. Seperti yang dilaporkan dalam jurnal sains terkemuka Nature, sejak tahun 50-an, kita telah kehilangan hampir 90% dari semua populasi ikan besar di lautan. Salah satu studi paling mendalam yang pernah dilakukan untuk menyelidiki persediaan ikan dalam jurnal Nature menyatakan bahwa dengan tingkat penangkapan ikan saat ini, perikanan dunia diprediksi akan jatuh dalam waktu kurang dari 30 tahun. Menurut IPBES, Badan Antar Pemerintah yang menilai keadaan keanekaragaman hayati kita, penyebab utama punahan biota laut adalah penangkapan ikan. Keinginan dan selera makan kita terhadap ikan sungguh menghabiskan kehidupan di laut kita.
Today we have agreed on fishing opportunities for European fishermen worth more than 5 billion euros and benefiting more than 50,000 fishermen. The catches agreed today will continue to make the European fishing industry highly profitable also in 2019.
Norwegia, negara indah dengan pemandangan yang menakjubkan. Norwegia juga merupakan tempat yang menyimpan beberapa rahasia yang lebih gelap. Norwegia adalah salah satu eksportir ikan budidaya terbesar di dunia. Sebuah industri yang bernilai miliaran euro untuk perekonomian negaranya. Saat sebagian besar populasi ikan laut lepas hancur hingga nyaris punah, nelayan beralih ke budidaya perairan sebagai cara memelihara ikan di lingkungan yang terkendali. Norwegia menghasilkan lebih banyak ikan salmon dan kod ternak daripada negara lain di dunia. Sekitar 70% ikan yang kita makan hari ini kini berasal dari peternakan ikan buatan. Saat ribuan ikan dipelihara berdekatan di keramba laut yang kecil, penyakit dan kutu mudah menyebar dan menjadi masalah besar bagi industri. Akibatnya, pestisida, disinfektan, dan antibiotik digunakan secara ekstensif untuk menjaga ikan tetap hidup hingga saatnya dijual. Untuk menghilangkan kutu ikan digunakan perahu pompa khusus yang menyedot ikan dalam mesin penyedot air raksasa. Ikan kemudian dipompa melalui mesin dan saat melalui mesinnya, ikannya dipanaskan dalam suhu tinggi atau disiram cairan kimiawi yang menghilangkan sebagian besar kutu sebelum dipompa kembali ke keramba. Ikan disiram bahan kimia seperti hidrogen peroksida dan azametipos untuk membunuh parasit dan penyakit. Dan diberi pakan dengan bahan kimia seperti teflubenzuron, emamectin, dan diflubenzuron yang menurut sifatnya sendiri memang beracun. Peneliti telah menemukan bahwa jejak bahan kimia tersebut dapat diserap tubuh ikan dan berakhir di piring kita. Itulah yang terjadi pada peternakan di seluruh dunia. Taryn Bishop, seorang aktivis lingkungan, bertemu dengan Green Warriors, sebuah organisasi konservasi yang bermarkas di Bergen, di pantai barat Norwegia. Green Warriors telah menyelidiki praktik yang menghancurkan peternakan ikan pada ekosistem lokal selama bertahun-tahun dan mengajak Taryn untuk melihat sisi gelap yang berada di bawah permukaan dari peternakan itu. Kapal selam yang didesain secara khusus memungkinkan mereka untuk melihat dasar laut di bawah keramba. Di sepanjang dasar laut ditemukan lapisan lumpur tebal yang terdiri dari kotoran ikan, bakteri, dan sisa pakan. Lumpur ini penuh dengan pestisida yang ditambahkan ke pakan ikan. Dan penelitian baru menunjukkan bahwa pestisida dalam jumlah besar yang ditambahkan ke ekosistem laut peternakan ikan di seluruh dunia memberi dampak yang mematikan bagi keanekaragaman hayati laut alami. Lumpur ini juga melepaskan sejumlah besar gas metana penyebab pemanasan iklim. Para peneliti di Universitas Oxford telah menemukan beberapa jenis budidaya perairan yang melepaskan lebih banyak gas metana daripada produksi daging sapi. Liv Holmfjord adalah kepala dari Direktorat Perikanan Norwegia. Selama di Norwegia, kami diberi informasi bahwa dia tidak hanya bertugas mengatur industri budidaya ikan negaranya, tapi juga memiliki saham di salah satu perusahaan budidaya ikan terbesar di Norwegia. Banyak kelompok konservasi merasa ada konflik kepentingan besar di sini. Holmfjord setuju untuk bertemu Taryn untuk menjawab pertanyaan tentang keadaan peternakan ikan Norwegia.
Well, fish farming is quite a new industry in Norway. It started back in the 1960s with some local entrepreneurs starting with hobby, and it's grown until it's a billion-euro industry today. And seafood is the second largest export industry in Norway, and fish farming accounts for 2/3 of the export value of seafood.
So recently, we found out that you also have shares in one of the largest fish farm companies in Norway. Do you not feel that that's a conflict of interest?
Of course, there could be a conflict of interest, but this is a fact that's been known since before I got this position, and I've been open about it. I'm not involved in the business from day to day or at any. So it's, and if there's we have, and I have. So I have to. Do you have to start over again? Hva heter det for noe da? So all the decisions that I made will either be for the whole industry, not especially for this fish farm, or it's only an advice to the politicians, and the politicians are setting the limits and the actual regulations. So if there's an actual case handling regarding this company, then I will step aside.
When on a few jobs I was working here over the years as a diver, we used to be around the fish farms cleaning the dead, deceased fish from the nets and fixing the nets, etc. after storms.
and on occasion we'd seen some of the boats coming in to clean the lice off them. There's quite a lot of dead fish, you know, diseased or they've died, but it's a lot of pink mush, you know, not healthy. Look, having seen what I've seen and worked on the various sites round about where I've been in Scotland, I wouldn't eat farmed salmon. No, I would have. Pretty rank.
Salmon is marketed as healthy. It's also marketed in a very devious way, deceptive way, that they think it's a wild product. So it's a fake product, it's a fatty product, it's contaminated, it's marketed as healthy, but it's not. So salmon, if you see salmon, alarm bells should start ringing.
It's pretty grim when you dive down to the bottom of the cages because, you know, we always see the bottom full of dead fish. And it's basically because many of these fish are so diseased, so parasite-ridden and laden with chemicals that they become sick and they live out their sad, short lives, basically looking like zombies. You know, you don't see this when you go to the restaurant or the supermarket, but this is basically what a lot of the fish actually look like before it ends up on our plates. So tonight, Don wanted to show us how much of the farmed fish actually dies because of the very unnatural and unsanitary ways that they are kept. And they have rows of very large metal containers that they are constantly filling up with the dead fish, and I have to say that the smell as we get closer is actually pretty disgusting.
So this is the sordid side of salmon farming in Scotland. This is the dirty secrets the industry don't want you to see. This is disease-ridden farmed salmon. It's 15 to 20% fat. That's where the contaminants, the cancer-causing contaminants, PCBs, dioxins, and the artificial colorings are. So this is something to be avoided at all costs. This is the salmon farm just here. We got freedom information, data from the Scottish Environment Protection Agency showing the use of over 50 tons of formaldehyde, not just at this site but other sites across Scotland. Is formaldehyde may cause cancer, suspected of causing genetic defects, toxic if swallowed, may cause respiratory irritation, causes damage to organs. Do not breathe.
One of the fish farm workers told us that the workers come down to the farm early in the morning, spraying the chemicals into the fish cages. So they're obviously spraying something down there in the water. The guy who gave us the tip-off said that toxic chemicals are widely used across Scotland, including formaldehyde and also hydrogen peroxide. And these are supposed to treat the diseases and lice problems which are both rampant across the fish farms. You know, these are not chemicals that you want in your body. Whatever he's spraying must be pretty powerful if he needs to wear a full protective chemical suit and a face mask.
Saat lautan menjadi pembuangan sampah 7 miliar orang dan peternakan mengisi ikan mereka dengan pakan kimia, makan ikan belum pernah sampai sebahaya ini.
You know, our oceans have become humanity's sewers. Everything eventually flows into the sea. So if you had a, time machine that could go back before the Industrial Revolution, it's a different story. But now, the highest levels of many of these persistent organic pollutants, we're talking about, DDT and PCBs and dioxins, the highest levels in our food supply are found in the aquatic food chain. Fish are not the safest choice anymore.
So Tony, it's great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thanks for coming.
Not at all. Thank you. A pleasure being here. So I wanted to ask you if you could share with us what exactly it was you began to feel when you realized something was going wrong.
I was exhausted more than usual, and then I was losing short-term memory, and that scared the hell out of me. And then I tore my rotator cuffs in a really intense snowboarding accident. And the doctor said, "Do you want to do your metals test?" And I said, "I got my amalgams out 25 years ago." He goes, "There's so many metals in the environment, you should do it." So I did. I get a phone call a week later, and I said to my assistant, "Just have him send the report." And he said, "No, it's an emergency. He has to speak to you." I was like, "No one wants to hear that." And so I called him up, and he said, "Tony, I showed your blood tests. You have extreme mercury poisoning. On a 0 to 5 scale, which is what we measure, 5 being toxic, you're 123. The doctor said, how long has this man been in the hospital?" And I just got off stage. So I said, "I can't understand this." So I went out, and they thought, maybe someone was trying to poison me because the number was so high. And I was very disciplined. I was a vegan for 12 years, and then I just went salad fish. And they brought the medical group out here, and they looked at it, and I found this man named Dr. Shade, who's the only guy who has an ideation process where you can see where the mercury came from, and it was fish. It's been 3 years, and I had some severe moments. It burned a hole in my esophagus, and I literally collapsed. I lost a third of my blood supply. I could have died. I lost half my hemoglobin.
People begin to lose their hair, their memory. They lose their memories, as you were doing, as you noticed. But they can also have headaches. They can complain of fatigue. They can also have depression. What we're seeing now is with the toxic environmental exposure, and especially with the mercury, methyl mercury in fish, is that everyone has got to be careful because the levels are going up.
Udo, tell me, because your specialty is in this, how do you get the fish oils that we all need for the brain and for the body if we can't have fish? What do you suggest?
Well, we used to get them from fish oils.
Yes.
But we can actually get them from vegetables. Flax is the richest source of omega-3 that everybody thinks should come from fish oil. If you get enough of that as starting material, your body will make what the fish oils make, and it'll be clean.
Many people take fish oils or have fish for the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. And you have to ask yourself the question, well, where do the fish get them from? And it turns out they get them from the algae in the ocean. They get them from plant food. So if you want the purest form of the long-chain, ready-made omega-3 fatty acids, the best way of doing that is simply to take an algae supplement, because then you've got the purest form of it and you don't have the extra risks of having the toxins and the heavy metals and the saturated fat and the cholesterol that you would get from eating a fish.
Sebuah penelitian peer review dari para peneliti di Scripps Institution of Oceanography di UC San Diego merupakan salah satu penelitian terbesar mengenai pencemaran ikan di dunia. Para ilmuwan menemukan kontaminan beracun pada ikan di seluruh lautan planet ini.
Nobody would go to the nearest body of water and put in like a cup and drink the water. You're basically getting the concentrated toxins if we're eating fish.
Lautan kita juga telah terisi dengan plastik. Karena lautan begitu luas, untuk memahami secara akurat dari mana sebagian besar plastik ini berasal, merupakan tantangan besar bagi ilmuwan manapun. Pulau sampah Pasifik besar, seluas sekitar 1,6 juta kilometer persegi, dapat memberikan kesempatan unik bagi kita untuk lebih memahami meningkatnya masalah mikroplastik di laut. Sebuah tim ilmuwan dari organisasi Ocean Cleanup telah beberapa lama mempelajari pulau sampah dan terkejut saat mereka menemukan sebagian besar plastik di pulau sampah bukan dari sedotan atau botol plastik bekas, tapi dari ribuan ton alat pancing yang dibuang dan terurai oleh laut menjadi triliunan keping mikroplastik. Sebuah studi yang baru diterbitkan dalam jurnal Nature menemukan bahwa sekitar 80% plastik di lautan Pasifik berasal dari alat pancing yang dibuang. Banyak ilmuwan setuju bahwa salah satu hal terbesar yang kita bisa lakukan sebagai individu untuk memecahkan masalah lautan plastik ini adalah dengan berhenti makan ikan dan beralih ke pola makan nabati.
At least half of the plastic in the sea today comes from discarded or lost fishing gear. Because all those nets, all those lines, all that stuff, it's just become a plasticized ocean. But we have a chance We have a chance right now to change our eating habits.
There's an estimate that there's over 5 trillion tons of plastic currently floating in the ocean. It's absolutely everywhere. Everywhere we look, we found microplastics, whether it's at the polar regions, in remote islands. Also, if we're looking on the surface or the seabed, and everywhere in between, we find microplastics. We've also found microplastics in just about every animal group that we've looked in. We've been sampling for microplastics for quite a while now, and we found that there's 27 times more bits of plastic than there are fish larvae.
Mikroplankton ditemukan di seluruh lautan. Mereka adalah penyaring pakan. Saat peneliti menambahkan mikroplastik ke lingkungan plankton, mereka terus melihat plankton menelan partikel plastik. Tanpa sadar, partikel kecil itu terdiri dari bahan kimia beracun. Plankton memakannya tanpa pandang bulu. Para peneliti mengamati bagaimana bahan kimia menumpuk dalam organ makhluk laut kecil ini. Plankton beracun lalu dimakan ikan yang lebih besar, dan para peneliti telah menemukan bahwa sebagian besar ikan yang kita makan hari ini telah mengakumulasi bahan kimia ini di dalam dagingnya. Sebuah penelitian di Universitas Plymouth menemukan bahwa lebih dari 1/3 dari semua ikan yang diuji mengandung mikroplastik. Saat kita makan ikan yang terkontaminasi ini, kita menelan bahan kimia beracun yang sama ke dalam tubuh kita. Dan penelitian terbaru menunjukkan akumulasi racun serupa pada manusia.
Our scientists tell us we're now in the 6th extinction event of life on this Earth. It doesn't even make the headlines. No one even knows about it.
Saya kesemua walaupun ni mati kena, hati mereka ni mati kena. Nani ke? Yalo siapa ni? Sia hanya saya mereka tu sebenarnya. Tony na waku keban. Thera ate nekuni. Saya tidak di saya metani. Saya nunu ada yang nunu ni. Saya potolnya nunu. Thera ati mereka. Ayo romera. Karena mereka senang ikan hacker, atau di terlihat. Nekali, saya ke pasti juga. Saya lah yang ngelawai kena. Ni nane, neno kapan? Tahu apa ni ti? Tuero ati mereka. Nyalo banyak apa? Naik ke pepeni kere. Terus ni kalau ni, nyasa dia ni. Tahu apa ni kalau ni? Na, baik lah. Bukti peti apa ni?
We've had 5 mass extinction events on this planet in 450 million years. Let me be clear on this. The last time we had an extinction event of this magnitude was 65 million years ago.
It's incredibly sad to realize just how many species, both in the oceans and on land, that we're losing at the moment. And it's up to all of us to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future.
Today, over 26,000 species are currently threatened with extinction,
And the most important driver of that is our use of land for agriculture.
Over time, livestock have been a major driver of biodiversity loss.
Some have predicted that by 2045, the species loss will be so great that we won't recover. The Earth will suffer ecological collapse. And the biggest thing you and I can do is change our diet.
Beberapa ilmuwan telah mulai menyebut krisis saat ini sebuah pemusnahan biologis. Menurut jurnal Science of the Total Environment dari Universitas Florida, peternakan hewan adalah penyebab utama hilangnya keanekaragaman hayati. Menurut sebuah penelitian yang diterbitkan dalam jurnal Science, jika seluruh dunia beralih ke pola makan nabati secara eksklusif, kita akan membebaskan lebih dari 75% dari tanah subur di dunia. Dan banyak hutan yang sebelumnya ditebang untuk peternakan bisa dipulihkan. Sekarang ada banyak inisiatif luar biasa di seluruh dunia yang berupaya untuk melakukan hal itu. KISAH, mesin pencari online mirip Google, adalah salah satu inisiatif yang memakai pendapatan yang dihasilkan dari iklan untuk membayar komunitas warga lokal untuk menanam kembali pohon sebagai upaya penghijauan. Maurizio, salah satu rimbawan utama KISAH, telah bekerja keras menanam kembali hutan hujan di Brasil.
Plantei minha primeira árvore, eu tinha 5 anos de idade. Eu nem imaginava que 20 anos depois, esse esforço tão pequeno teria virado uma das iniciativas que mais plantou árvores na história do Brasil. Foram mais de 2,5 milhões de árvores, 2.000 hectares plantados, muitas áreas preservadas pela ação de combate a incêndios florestais.
Pohon menghembuskan kehidupan ke dalam dunia kita. Saat menanam pohon, kita menebur benih masa depan kita di planet ini. Penelitian penting yang dipimpin oleh Dr. Marcus Springman dari Universitas Oxford di Inggris menemukan bahwa untuk memiliki kesempatan menjaga suhu di bawah 2 derajat Celcius, ambang batas berbahaya yang telah ditetapkan dalam Perjanjian Iklim Paris, penduduk di negara-negara berpenghasilan tinggi harus mengurangi konsumsi daging mereka secara drastis hingga sekitar 80%.
Policymakers have been very reluctant to address the livestock issue. It's entirely out of keeping with the urgency of the crisis that we're facing.
Hi, Otto Brockway for Brockstar Films. This is a question for Commissioner Hogan. The scientists at Oxford University have been very clear that livestock farming has a far greater impact than plant-based farming. With this in mind, would it not be common sense to reduce the billions in subsidy payments to livestock farming in Europe and offer them to plant-based farming instead as an incentive to a much more sustainable food system?
We have made our proposals based on protecting the farmers because they are, unlike you and I, they're out in all sorts of weathers and in all sorts of market risks. And you and I may not know anything about that because this is their lives. They're producing high quality food for us all so that we can have this particular good quality products available to us at all times. Sometimes under local conditions like organic, more times it's conventional farming. So we provide financial support at the moment for that. And it's a public good that's not always recognised. But the movement of our policy is in the direction of our farmers being centrally involved in providing more public goods. And if you want to do anything in life, you have to pay people. Sometimes I understand that there's a moral obligation and there's people of principle. But most of the time, 99% of the time, they have to get paid. So as professionals that we're expecting to provide good quality food and do more on public goods, we pay our farmers. This is a decision that we make at political level.
Livestock emit methane and nitrous oxide. Now, most people, when they think of climate change, they think of CO2, carbon dioxide, which is a very potent global warming gas. But methane is 25 times more potent per molecule when it's released than CO2. And nitrous oxide is 298 times more potent per molecule than CO2. These are very powerful global warming gases.
So today we have a very special camera called a hyperspectral imaging camera, and it basically enables us to be able to see gases that would be otherwise invisible to the naked eye. And today we're looking at methane gas. Methane is a gas that is being produced by cows when they belch.
Gas metana bersama dengan gas lain yang dihasilkan di atmosfer telah menyebabkan sepertiga dari pemanasan global sejak tahun 1750. Peternakan hewan merupakan sumber gas metana terbesar yang bisa kita kendalikan. Pengurangan tajam emisi gas metana bisa memperlambat pemanasan global hingga 15-25 tahun, menjadikannya cara yang paling efektif untuk memperlambat pemanasan global di tahun-tahun kritis yang mendatang. Untuk menunjukkan potensi pemanasan yang berbeda dari gas-gas iklim, kita dapat melihat eksperimen yang dikenal dengan percobaan penyerapan inframerah. Di sini kita melihat 4 patung es berbentuk bumi, masing-masing dalam ruang kedap udara tersendiri. Ruang itu diibaratkan layaknya atmosfer yang mengelilingi planet ini. Masing-masing ruang memiliki pemanas inframerah yang ditaruh di atasnya, diatur pada suhu yang sama, dan masing-masing diisi gas yang berbeda. Ruang pertama diisi udara normal yang kita hirup dari hari ke hari. Ruang kedua diisi karbon dioksida, gas pemicu pemanasan iklim yang terkenal. Ruang ketiga diisi gas metana, gas yang terkait dengan peternakan hewan, dan ruang keempat diisi dinitrogen oksida, gas yang juga terkait dengan peternakan. Seiring waktu, kita melihat patung es di dalam ruang karbon dioksida sedikit lebih mencair dibanding dengan udara normal. Namun pada kurun waktu yang sama, patung-patung di dalam ruang metana dan dinitrogen oksida mulai mencair dengan cepat karena suhu di dalam naik jauh lebih tinggi daripada udara normal dan karbon dioksida. 16 jam kemudian, hasilnya nyata. Jelas terlihat bahwa metana dan dinitrogen oksida, dua gas utama yang dihasilkan peternakan, adalah gas pemanas iklim yang kuat. Dari sekitar 70 miliar hewan darat yang dipelihara untuk konsumsi manusia setiap tahun di seluruh dunia, hampir 90%-nya adalah ayam. Maraknya konsumsi ayam kini menjadi sebuah masalah. Meski ayam memiliki dampak lingkungan lebih rendah daripada daging merah, lebih dari 90% ayam secara global kini diternakan secara intensif, dan ini memiliki efek yang menghancurkan bagi planet kita. Jika kita membandingkan kalori protein daging dan protein nabati seperti kacang chickpea, ayam tidak terlalu merusak lingkungan dibandingkan dengan daging merah yang biasa dikonsumsi. Namun, ayam tetap menyebabkan 40 kali lebih pemanasan terkait iklim per kalori protein daripada kacang chickpea, dan memakai air 50 kali lebih banyak.
We know that if we would shift from ruminant meats to other meats, then we probably would reduce our footprint just from that particular product by about a factor of 10, which is quite a bit. But if you compare that with how much you would reduce your footprint if you went to plant-based products, that is about a factor of 100. And that's the reason why shifting towards more plant-based diets has such a big impact, because we're really talking about different scales here.
Daging organik diklaim memiliki dampak lingkungan dan iklim yang lebih sedikit. Tapi sebuah penelitian di Universitas Oxford menemukan fakta daging organik atau yang diproduksi konvensional hanya sedikit bedanya dalam emisi rumah kaca.
So in our data, we didn't find big differences between organic and conventional across multiple indicators. What we did find is that no matter how you produce animal products, even the lowest impact forms of production still create higher emissions and use more land than typical vegetable proteins. So that's saying something really important. That's saying that even if you go into the shops and try and purchase sustainable meat or dairy, it's always going to be better to purchase vegetable proteins instead.
Setiap tahun, pemerintah Amerika Serikat memberikan sekitar $20 juta untuk mensubsidi pertanian buah dan sayuran. Kini diperkirakan Biaya tahunan yang dihabiskan pembayar pajak Amerika Serikat untuk penyakit terkait dengan konsumsi daging dan susu mencapai sekitar 314 miliar dolar.
And when you cram, tens of thousands of animals in these cramped, filthy, unhygienic conditions, basically live atop their feces, it's just like a breeding ground. Animal to human diseases that arise because of the way we're now treating animals, whether it's these live animal markets in East Asia, whether it's the bushmeat trade. And the concern is that with enough spins at genetic roulette on these swine factory farms, these chicken factory farms, we're gonna, end up with one of these viruses that's not only deadly to chickens, but can jump and transmit human to human and cause the next human pandemic.
The risk of large-scale factory farmings increases the risk or the likelihood that we might have a pandemic, particularly of influenza in the future.
This pandemic has been very severe. But this is not necessarily the big one.
Flu babi yang membunuh lebih dari 500 juta orang diyakini berasal dari peternakan babi. AIDS dan virus Ebola diyakini berasal dari konsumsi hewan liar. Sedangkan MERS berasal dari unta dan juga susu dan daging unta. SARS diduga menyebar dari pasar basah hewan hidup. Sama seperti dugaan dibalik terjadinya pandemi COVID-19 belakangan ini. Flu burung diyakini berasal dari peternakan ayam dan juga pasar basah hewan hidup. Dan virus campak diduga berasal dari peternakan sapi.
People know now what a global pandemic feels like. They've seen the effects. They will be feeling the effects for many years to come. And this is a chance, I think, an opportunity to point out that this particular route of infection is a very concerning one.
World Health Organization telah mengumumkan bahwa era pasca antibiotik sudah dekat. Waktu di mana goresan kecil di lengan bisa berakibat fatal. Antibiotik ajaib penyelamat kehidupan kita akan menjadi tak berguna karena terlalu sering dipakai bukan oleh manusia, tetapi karena diberikan setiap hari pada miliaran hewan ternak.
So having been a butcher for 6 years, one thing I know is that if people knew what happened in the production of their food, they wouldn't eat meat. So one of the things that we would hit every day was pus nodules, tumors, cysts. It was something that we would hit on a daily basis. Having worked in a supermarket chain, I saw this firsthand every single day. So here's one that's running along the shoulder blade. Oh. Yeah. That is what I remember in the butchery. It comes out like a thick toothpaste. I remember that every single day.
That's interesting to hear you had that experience all the way over there, because in the UK, exactly the same.
Yeah.
We would see that on a daily basis. But those people who say it's not my butcher does this, they need to open their eyes, because if their butcher's being honest with them, we know. Yeah. We both know. And any honest butcher's going to admit it. They're not going to want to tell the public because it's going to affect their business. Yeah. But it is a fact.
And me working in multiple butcheries, I saw these common trends across the board. So I know that it wasn't just isolated to the one that I was working in. It was across the board for me.
People need to reconnect with what they're eating, and the whole process that we're talking about here of how that food gets to them is hidden from them, and it's hidden for a reason. Because if they saw it, it would most definitely make them want to think harder about what they're eating.
Saat lautan dan udara kita mulai menghangat, siklus air di planet mulai berubah.
Climate change changes the water cycles of the planet. The heat that's being generated is forcing the precipitation into the clouds, so we're getting more concentrated precipitation in our clouds and more dramatic, extreme, and unpredictable water events all over the world.
Di wilayah utara Pulau Pasifik terpencil Taiwan, warga Atayal hidup di daerah tinggi pegunungan. Taiwan tidak asing dengan cuaca ekstrim. Tetapi beberapa tahun terakhir, kekuatan dan frekuensi topan telah meningkat. Ini memiliki efek yang menghancurkan bagi warga Atayal dan cara hidup mereka.
Joro laki ku cipok na toki ga ya ba untuk kaya menyak nak sya ga joro bala menyak ne. Ini pejuh menyak na wi. Babaw na ga siga tokah tananak mengedung. Naga ta nyan yakah na orasyo. Yakah lungan dalah, lungun dalah nian mah cakeh.
Sementara sebagian besar dunia telah mengalami peningkatan banjir ekstrim, di banyak tempat justru terjadi sebaliknya. Sebagian besar dunia mulai mengalami kekeringan ekstrim yang menghancurkan ribuan ton tanaman. Dan di waktu yang sama, jutaan petani berjuang mencari air untuk sawah mereka.
I'm definitely worried about the future of our farm. I think we're seeing, many more swings in climate than we've seen in the past. But we want to use all the land that we have to grow food. But we haven't been able to just because of the shortages of water. It'll have an impact on food supply and prices and availability. And so estimates now are between 500,000 to over 1 million acres of farmland that'll come out of production in California.
Almeria yang terletak di bagian selatan Spanyol memiliki area sebesar 31.000 hektar yang diperuntukkan bagi pertanian sayuran dalam ruang. Almeria menghasilkan setengah dari produksi buah segar dan sayuran di Eropa, komponen penting dalam penyediaan sistem pangan benua. Tapi yang menjadi kekhawatiran sekarang adalah Spanyol sudah berada dalam cengkraman kemarau selama 20 tahun. Kemarau yang menurut para ahli iklim erat kaitannya dengan perubahan iklim.
In terms of water, the truth is that the drought in Spain has become a complete catastrophe. Our harvests are decreasing in massive quantities. Last year, in the area we are now, there was almost no harvest. People don't realize the food system is collapsing.
Akibat dari pergeseran sistem iklim global ini, kemarau di Afrika menjadi semakin parah. Sungai dan danau yang menyediakan air minum segar untuk ratusan jiwa kini mulai mengering. Saat konflik baru pecah akibat sumber daya yang makin berkurang, kita menyaksikan awal dari eksodus massal manusia menuju ke utara, kian terdesak untuk bertahan hidup. Pengungsi iklim ini rela mempertaruhkan segalanya agar mereka dan keluarga mereka bisa mencapai dataran Eropa yang mereka anggap sebagai tempat yang aman. Untuk menanggapi migrasi massal modern ini, Spanyol telah membangun tembok besar yang membentang di sepanjang perbatasan paling selatan negaranya di Melilla. Ribuan pengungsi mulai berkerumun di pagar perbatasan Spanyol dan membuat polisi kewalahan. Di tengah prediksi pola migrasi yang semakin meningkat, tampak semakin jelas bahwa dunia kita kurang siap untuk mengatasinya.
Osbal, Andral, Oskuigerbit, Moholpur.
Saat gurun Gobi di Mongolia mulai semakin meluas, menyebar, masuk dan mengambil alih lahan negaranya, seperti hewan buas yang memangsa segala macam bentuk kehidupan di jalannya. Banyak danau yang menghidupi manusia dan satwa liar kini telah mengering. Jika danau-danau itu terus menghilang, maka orang-orang akan terusir dari rumahnya, dipaksa mengungsi ke tanah yang jauh dan asing.
Уулс тэгшхэн сайхан байсан цаг саяхан санагдах юм. Хөгшчүүл хангаа дэлхийн нэг л өөр болоод байна гэж байна. Монголчууд байгаль дэлхийдээ дасан зогсож амьдэрсаар ирсэн. Гэхдээ байгаль орчин арай л дэндүү огцом хувьсаж байна удаа гэж. Энэ дэлхий дээр ам өрсөж үлдэхийн тулд их л төвчээртэй хатуужилтай байх хэрэгтэй болох нь дээ.
A lot of people talk about how much fresh water we use for hydrofracking. 700 billion gallons globally is wasted on fracking. So 700 billion gallons. Sounds like a lot, but animal agriculture, the production of animals that we use for meat around the globe, uses 70 trillion gallons of fresh water a year. Hundreds of thousands of times as much as fracking. And we give the cows and the chickens the good stuff, right? They don't get the Flint, Michigan, lead-tainted condoms floating in it water. They get the top shelf stuff because we don't want to screw up our sausage links. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, oh, here's the part. I'm a vegetarian and pigs are people too, meh. But no, let's ignore how the animals are treated in our factory torture farming. Let's pretend they're treated amazing for just a minute. It's like a celebrity backstage at the Oscars. They're just being fawned over and they get swag bags with free Apple Watches. Point is, you should still be upset about this because animal agriculture is killing us. And corporate media is fantastically pathetic on this topic. They never mention meat production. They never mention that a quarter pounder takes 660 gallons of fresh water to create. That's the equivalent of showering for 2 months.
So one usually underestimated impact of livestock production is the huge amounts of fresh water required for that production to be maintained and to be increased.
The problem is that in many places water is being used much faster than the natural renewal rates. Overall, in the world, 1.8 billion people are living in areas with severe water scarcity. The livestock sector is the single biggest water user in the world. 1/3 of the water use in the world is being used for producing animal products, meat and dairy. And it's not because those animals drink so much, it's really because there's a lot of water required to make the feed for the animals.
If we want enough fresh water for future generations, water alone dictates that we must change our diet away from meat and dairy.
Di seluruh dunia, kita bisa melihat bukti dari pergeseran global ke arah makanan bebas hewani yang dapat memberi kita harapan. Di tahun 2021, sebanyak 580.000 orang bergabung dengan kampanye Veganuary Inggris. Dan diperkirakan kini ada lebih dari 4 juta orang yang mengidentifikasi diri sebagai vegan di seluruh Inggris. Di Kanada, diperkirakan 10% dari populasi telah menjadi vegan atau vegetarian. Dan di Amerika Serikat, lebih dari 50% koki menambah masakan vegan ke menu mereka. Dengan peningkatan 600% dalam gaya hidup vegan selama 3 tahun terakhir.
A few years ago, it was quite a challenge to get hold of good vegan food, but today we're pretty much spoiled for choice, and there are vegan options everywhere.
Thanks. It tastes like a normal hot dog. Is it a normal hot dog? Like, as in, like, or is this like plant-based or something?
So it is actually plant-based, yeah. So
It's really nice. I prefer it because I don't really eat meat that much, so this is good.
Okay.
Well, I like meat and it tastes good.
Yeah.
For not being meat.
Would you be happy with that?
Yeah, I'd be stoked. I love meat too much.
So I feel like if I went plant-based, I'd miss it. But if this like stuff tastes the same, yeah, I'd be very happy with this.
Nice messy fingers.
It is, yeah. That's all good burger. Thank you.
Would it interest you to know that that's completely plant-based?
And I wouldn't know. So that I would definitely, wow, that's a winner. Yeah, I'm amazed.
If burgers always tasted like that, would you be happy to just not eat a beef burger again?
Yeah, no, I got a good veg, yeah.
Yeah?
I'd like you to tell me which one of these nuggets is plant-based and which one is real meat.
Okay. It's very hard to say which one is.
They taste exactly the same, honestly.
These are not the chicken.
No.
That's interesting.
Which one of this is animal meat and which one of this is plant-based? Meat or not meat? You're not sure? You're not sure?
You're not, yeah, I'm not sure.
Meat. You? Yes. Are wrong. Okay. Okay.
But you think the second one was chicken? Yeah. The second one was actually plant-based.
No way.
Yeah, and the first one was chicken. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't. I couldn't have guessed that. I definitely thought the first one. Yeah, definitely.
It seems that changing what we eat to a more sustainable diet can also coincidentally be very beneficial to our health. There is a growing understanding that we can actually prevent, and in many cases even reverse, some of our most common diseases, all through a shift towards a whole food vegan diet.
Humans can survive on many different kinds of diet, but many decades of research has now shown us that the best way of not just surviving but truly thriving is on a whole food plant-based diet.
A human can be healthy on a plant-based diet without any animal products. The major dietetic associations around the world, including the British Dietetic Association, have produced statements to say exactly that a diet made up of whole plant foods is healthy for humans all stages of their life.
And not only can they be healthy, but they can restore or reclaim their health adopting a plant-based diet.
There are certain areas, certain populations around the world that have extraordinary health and longevity. For example, the largest number of centenarians, people that live over 100, these so-called blue zones.
What's really interesting about the blue zones, they actually have more centenarians than anywhere else in the world. And a centenarian is someone that lives at least 100 years. But what's really interesting about the blue zones is when people reach these advanced ages, they are still productive. So the blue zones have taught us a lot. And the bottom line is we really want to try to emulate what the people of the blue zones are doing.
5 wilayah yang dikenal sebagai zona biru meliputi Okinawa di Jepang, Sardinia di Italia, Ikaria di Yunani, Nicoya di Costa Rica, dan Loma Linda di California.
So the question is, well, what do they all have in common?
They have a predominantly plant-based diet. They have a diet rich in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, soy, lentils, chickpeas. They have a diet rich in all these nutrients, and that's one thing that they have in common.
So the EPIC study is the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition. It followed over 500,000 individuals from 10 European countries for more than 15 years. Those in the EPIC study that were eating predominantly plant-based or eating high levels of fruits and vegetables lived longer, had lower incidence of cancer and heart disease. About 2,500 of the individuals in the EPIC Oxford only ate plant food, so they were vegan. And even though they weren't the most healthy vegans or healthy plant eaters, you could show that these plant eaters were healthier. They had a lower incidence of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer.
From everything we have discovered on this journey, it seems that moving away from animal foods to plant-based foods instead can not only give us a whole host of amazing health benefits, but also gives us a chance to be able to leave a sustainable planet for future generations to come. Perhaps the single most meaningful change that we can make as individuals is ultimately deciding what ends up each day on our plates.
We are running out of time. The world community must acknowledge that animal agriculture is the most destructive industry on our planet. We can't wait for government policies and other organizations to create a better life for ourselves. We need to stand up now and make our voices heard.
Globally, for the typical consumer, avoiding meat and dairy is probably the single biggest way to reduce your impact on Earth.
Without addressing what we eat, we simply won't make it.
This is a #1 priority. This is a next step in taking responsibility for our communities, our planet, our biosphere, our fellow species.
People say, what can I do as an individual? It feels overwhelming. Well, you can make individual choices. We all can. Our individual choices affect the collective choices. When you hear about airplanes and cars, and we're still going to use those things. But the choices we make in our diet, this agricultural business where we use animals as the primary source of protein, the one thing I think we can all do is, individuals, is make our own individual choices, how we're going to live, how we're going to eat. Plant-based diet makes all the difference in the world. Just make some choices that are good for you, and being good for you will be good for the planet.
Planet ini adalah rumah kita. Dan yang terjadi sekarang tergantung kepada kita semua. Sejarah telah menunjukkan saat kita bersama, bersatu dalam satu tujuan, kita mampu mencapai hal-hal yang luar biasa. Di hadapan kita terbentang peluang untuk membangun dunia di mana kita bisa berkembang. Namun, jam terus berdetak. Dan waktu hampir habis.